The Wife by W. Harold Thompson, born in 1887. McCrae, the shepherd, was one of your home-loving kind, a placid man as a general of ting, who appreciated his comforts and was best pleased when the pipe in mouth and body at rest he could lounge by his own fireside. Thus there was contentment in his heart when on that night, the night of the weekly market at Invernahain, he turned at last onto the moorland track at a point half a mile or so, which his lonely cottage squatted. He had got through with his work sooner than he had expected, but the exertions of the day had tired him, and the depressing nature of the night seemed somehow to add to this tiredness. The skies had been grey all through the muggy day, and now, at gloaming time, the shoulders of the mountains were being wrapped about snugly by coverlets of mist, and the firewoods were mere irregular slabs of gloom. Well, thank the Lord, there was a warm kitchen waiting for him, and Jeannie would have a hearty meal ready very soon. With head bent a little and hands behind him linked loosely about his shepherd's crook, he trudged through the mud steadily, that was until on a sudden he heard someone whistling lowly the chorus of a Highland folk song. His body stiffening, McCrae jerked his head up, and after hesitating for a moment or two, went forward again more slowly. Through the dusk he could see now the approaching figure of a man, and because with white heat that leapt in his mind the certainty that this man must be Andrew Cairns. His lips pressed together and his fingers gripped more tightly at the crook. He had never liked Cairns, and of late his dislike had been merging into something more bitter. For disturbing whispering had reached him. There had been irritating warnings given by recognized gossips in the village, and even Jeannie herself, though she had striven to keep him from anything which might cause distress, had hinted, when he broached the matter to her half-jokingly, that Khan seemed to seek her out when opportunity offered, and on such occasion was inclined to say foolish things. There was naught serious in it, of course, but still McCrae had his full share of Highland pride and a wonderful sense of dignity where his wife was concerned. As he moved forward now, he became aware first that the whistling had ceased, and second, that the man who had whistled was stepping carefully from the track and into the shelter of a clump of great whin bushes. This action on the other part perplexed the shepherd at first, but gradually some strange emotion stirred in him and moment by moment expanded until it gripped him irresistibly. Easy-going and slow to move though he was, the blood in him could run hotly enough at times, and he had made no effort to beat back his rising wrath. So Andrew Cairns was wishful to avoid meeting, eh? Was he? Very well indeed. Very well then. That meant that the other would be called upon to explain a thing or two. Just by the wings, McCrae paused and called out the young farmer's name. "You needn't hide there, Cairns," he said, peering searchingly into the darkness of the bushes. "I saw you step aside from the track a moment or two back, and I'll be wanting a word with you if you please." seconds passed in silence. Then the bushes were parted, and a tall man stepped out, arrogant of face and with a lie upon his lips. "Hello, Hamish," he started. "So it's you, is it? You don't sound terrible good-humoured tonight, but maybe you'll explain why in a moment. What do you say by talking about me hiding? That's a daft-like thing to say. Why should I hide from you, or from any other man for that matter, or for the matter of that? If you want to know, I'll been sitting by the bushes earlier in the evening, and I'd left my pipe behind me. I was just having a look, just looking round the bush." A short exclamation of impatience came from McCrae. "Do you think you're dealing with a child or a fool that you talk to me that way, eh?" he asked. "It's a lie that you told Cons, and you know it." The other laughed. A laugh deeply tinged with nervousness, but finishing off blusteringly. He conceived this simple-minded shepherd as being a man with whom he could afford to play the high hand, and man of whom he had no reason in the world to be even momentarily afraid. And yet, despite the words which presently he spoke, and despite the very bold front which he presented, a mysterious fear did gnaw at him. It was very vaguely defined so far, and, conscious of his physical strength and of his ready tongue, he contrived to brush the fear completely aside for now. "Look, McCrae, you shouldn't get drinking when you go to the market, all I'm saying," he said. "Whiskey, and especially the kind that McBain sells, doesn't do your sort of man any good, does it?" "A lie, you say," he went on, his voice rising with the change in his mood. "By God, McCrae, you're not afraid. But I don't take that sort of talk from any man, you know." "You'll have to take it from me, boy. I say again that you lied. I say that you're trying to hide from me, and I say that you wanted to do that because you've been at me cottage and pestering me Jeannie with your love-making speeches and whatnot. Proved to be right in thinking that, then as sure as you and me are standing here and facing each other, I'll settle with you, Cans, and I'll settle now, boy." The other moved his shoulders, and then, swayed by vanity and a belief in his power to meet successfully any onslaught that might be made, spoke with reckless insolence. "Well, if you want to have it that way, have it," he said. "Maybe I did call at your cottage, and maybe I did have a wee word with Jeannie. What then, eh? What are you going to do about it, sonny?" McCrae held the crook in his right hand, and the fingers of his left were opening and shutting convulsively. Big drops of sweat had oozed out upon his brow, and his throat was hot and dry. "You can dare to stand and talk to me that way, boy?" His voice strained and hoarse. "You can dare, man, if you've been worrying my Jeannie. I'll feel like choking the life out of you with these 2 hands of mine. Oh, you needn't go in that so foolish. I mean what I say. and see what I do. Every word, boy. Now let's add it. The real truth, I mean. Did you go to my cottage and stick up my wife? I did, mister. There you have the thing, plump and plain. And what's more, I'm going again and I feel like it too. You'll go again? Words came in a sort of crackling whisper. Okay, so... Nah, I don't think that you'll ever go again, sonny. Now if I can stop you, listways, sneaking coward that you are, to creep down here while I'm away, then to creep home again just after I'm due back. Hey! But I spoiled things a bit tonight, didn't I? Getting home sooner than usual. Oh, I've heard things about you cans. Oh, but I didn't believe them. I couldn't, I couldn't, no. It seemed too kind of rotten a game altogether for a man to play. I spoke to me Ginny about you not more than 10 days now. The other's lips twisted. You did you? Oh, what was Jeannie pleased to say about me? Nah, much. For she wouldn't be wanting to accept me like. But she said enough to let me understand that you'd make love to her quick enough if she let you. Even in the gathering darkness, you could see the sneer that came to the farmer's face, and the sneer almost made the words that followed it, unleashed the leaping, quivering hate in his heart. Jeannie had been insulted, foully and grossly she had been insulted, and she was his little Jeannie. Not in a bottle. His well-loved mate for life. The real deal. You needn't be so funny about it, Khan said. And though his words were arrogantly challenging, he stepped back a pace while he spoke them. Go back now to your wonderful wife, mister, and ask her whether she's got the same kind of kisses for you as she had for me a wee while back. Why, you fool! It was then that McCrae, with a crazy clamouring in his brain, and with upon his lips a guttural primitive muttering, struck. Twice he struck, and behind the blow there was all the force of his great frame trembling with the bloodlust of animal battle. At the first blow, Khan swayed upon his heels. At the second, a groan came from him spasmodically, and toppling backwards, he fell a huddled heap upon the rough roadway. Oh my God. In an instant, McCrae was beside himself, his sinewy, merciless fingers about the other's throat now, but their pressure was not needed. His second blow had killed the man, dead. He had dared to speak lightly of the dearly loved Jeannie. That was enough. Her honour. Remember, her honour was everything, yeah? It was a full minute before the reality of what he had done became clear to the shepherd. Then, with a spirit of horror laying clammy fingers upon him, he crouched there in the mud of the lane, his breath coming spasmodically, his wide, crazed eyes staring at the face of the dead man. Khan's head lay raised rather grotesquely to one side, For a moment, McCrae touched the chin with his fingers. Then he started back, shivering. It seemed that through the mugginess of the night, a little chill tongue of breeze came to lick upon his face. Trembling fingers go into his throat to ease the sudden tightness of his collar. He shook his head as a great dog might have done. Then, wrath beating down fear for the moment, he looked again at the face below his own. Liar! He exclaimed jerkily. Shutting his eyes, he drew the body close to the narrow ditch at the side of the lane, and then, having looked around him fearfully, set off with long strides towards the cottage. Moment by moment, as he went forward, the awfulness of the tragedy grew upon him. He, Hamish McCrae, of the clan McCrae, who, all his days, had been a decent living man, quarrelling with none, and doing what little kindnesses he could, was a murderer! He committed murder! Sooner or later, and it might quite well be sooner, the body of Carnes would be found. And when that happened, the man for whom the police and the helpers would search would inevitably be himself. They must not get him, should not get him really. Not if he and his baby Ginny between them could prevent it. It was of his beloved Ginny that he was thinking most, of course. Her honor, though indeed fear had entered into him and claimed him as a, victim really. When he stood at last outside his cottage door, his hair was damp with sweat, and try as he would, he could not stop the twitching of his facial muscles, nor the convulsive movement of his fingers. He was a wreck. For long seconds he stood there in the darkened porch, trying to gain some measure of self-control. But just when it seemed that he was succeeding, the vision of Carnes' pallid dead face wrenched at his frayed nerves so that they snapped, and snapping left a weak thing on the verge of hysteria, where before there had been a strong man. The wreck. Into the lamp-lighted kitchen he went, blunderingly, and when he saw his pure wife sitting in her armchair, her pretty fingers busy with the knitting of a sock, he paused, and putting up an arm, drew the rough sleeve of the jacket across his brow. When the arm fell to the side again, the tweed was smeared with perspiration, which glinted in the light. A smile upon her lips, his wife turned towards him, but on the instant the smile went. "Hamish!" she cried, and in a dull sort of way he noted how her fingers gripped the worsted which she had held. "Hamish, what is it? You look like death!" "Death?" And the sweetness of her face seared his heart then. "Wife, there's been death tonight, and now I've got to try and save my own life. Listen and hear me out before you say anything. You know the old shailing 3 miles up on the moor, and just below Raven's Crag?" She nodded. Her lips were parted, but she did not speak. "Well, I'm going there now," he went on, "because I daren't stay here. Up there I'll be able to think out some plan of escape, I can't stay here. I'll choke if I try to. I've got to be off now. But God, He knows that I didn't mean to kill the man, and that He made me strike him. He with the devil's tongue of his. She put a hand up to her hair, smoothing it nervously. Then she wetted her lips. Sit down, she said. Sit down and tell me what you mean. But a shudder shook him. I can't, he said. I can't stop here now in a minute. Somewhere might come in the shillings I'll be safe, and then I can wrestle things out and think of a way of escape. You'll know what I'll be imagining at the shilling or the shelling. Yes. If anyone comes here within the next hour or two, say that I haven't been home, that you don't know where I am, and then when things are quiet, come out to me, lassie, and bring some scrum and drinks around and bet still your dear words of love, trust and honor. I'll be waiting for you and praying, you know. Praying at least that you're coming. The knitting fell from her fingers, and her hands gripped at the arms of the chair that she was sitting in. What have you done? What have you done, love? She whispered. For heaven's sake, Hamish, tell me. He backed towards the door. I met under the crans, he said, and I challenged him with having pestered you, darling. He laughed at me and insulted me, you know. I struck him down, I killed him, done with. Oh, I think I see him now. I didn't mean to kill him. I didn't mean to do it. I'm a mother, Jenny, darling. That's what they'll say. That I murdered him. A small, half-crushed cry came from the woman. And then she lay back limply unconscious. He went to her and put her arms, or his arms, about her and kissed her lips, even though she was unconscious. Was that with consent? It doesn't matter. And then he's already in enough trouble. Then, arranging her more comfortably, he's going to get the death penalty anyway, so what does he care? He turned and went from the cottage, for terror was goading him. Out on the moor a breeze was a-stirring, and it breathed upon his face kindly. Oh, okay. At first he walked rapidly, and then for nearly a mile he ran. Probably the fastest mile ever. Now and again he stumbled over a tuft or heather of some unseen stone. And when at last the rickety walls of the hut showed dimly before him, his breath was coming in great sobbing gasps. Once inside, he drew the creaking door behind him and lay down upon a heap of dried bracken. His lips twitched in the formation of strange, broken sentences. "Ginny," he muttered. "Oh, dear Lord, what over me, Ginny and me? He was a beast and a liar. Maybe he had to come." Then he leaned over and lay next, his face resting in the crook of his elbow. Outside on the moor, everything was still. The eeriness of the night touched him. Every now and then he could hear the breeze sough softly through the clump of fir trees near at hand. And once when he heard the whirl of great wings, and little later from the hillside the cry of a wasp, he sat up and stared into the darkness, an agony of terror in his heart. Presently he went on his knees, and with his fingers gripped about each other, prayed mumblingly. "Dear God," he said, "you've watched over her and me always, and you've protected us from harm and blessed her day after day. You'll be knowing that there isn't real bad in me, and that when I struck that man, it was just through the anger that he bred in me by saying what he said, damn it! Take away from me the fear that is in me now. Help me to be strong and give calm courage to my wife. I'm asking this for her, you know. Her honor is everything to me. Yes, no, that's true, God. Forgive me and comfort me. Amen." He rose then and stretched himself, and when some seconds had passed, seated himself among the bracken and dared to fill and light his pipe, but the tobacco could not save him, could not still his jangled nerves. Once he went to the door, and, pulling it open, looked out into the night. A drab world lay before him, with a mist creeping across it furtively. He was hungry, and more than for food he craved for something to drink. Leaning against the doorpost, care went from his face for a second or two, and his eyes softened. He was picturing Jeannie plodding bravely across the trackless moor to him, and carrying with her not merely food and drink, but what he had told her he prized so much more deeply, a loving, faithful heart and words of sympathy and high hope. Going back to the couch of bracken, he half lay, half sat there, his whirling, tormented brain striving to formulate some scheme of escape, but he could not think. As the hours went past, the small, mysterious sounds of the night time became more frequent, more noticeable, and at every one of these sounds, McCrae started dread clutching at him. Once a sheep coughed, and the cough was so like that of a man that the shepherd, though a lifetime's experience had made the sound familiar, got noiselessly to his feet and stood quivering with fists shut. Next moment a spurious laugh jarred in his throat, and he lay down again. He began to worry then about Jeannie, his beloved, his dearly beloved. He had no watch, but he deemed that she should have been with him by this time at least. Of course she had been in a faint when he had gone from the cottage, and it might be that she had not regained consciousness for a long time. What if she had never regained consciousness? What if the night held a double tragedy? Oh, the horror of the thought set, as it seemed chill water to run through his veins. The very awfulness of its agony made him cast it out at last, and he sat forward, hands between his knees, and his face somewhat more calm. So the minutes plodded past, a dreary, listless procession. He lay flat at last, his head close to the cold earth floor, and lying so, there came to him very faintly at first, a sound that thrilled. The sound of feet among the mist-drenched heather. Sitting up, he leaned his head to one side and listened, palpitating. The swishing of the feet grew gradually louder, and he fancied that he'd heard the sound of voices. But of course, that could not be, he told himself, and then through a chink in the flimsy wooden wall, he saw a swinging light. Yes, somebody was coming towards the shilling. Somebody who carried a lantern. It was Jeannie, coming to him after all, surely. Or could it be that the local constable and some of the villagers, had managed to track him? Just for an instant, the idea of fleeing from his place of shelter and out onto the moor came to him. Then, sighing, he shook his head mechanically. Nearer and nearer came the sound of footsteps. But no longer did he hear or fancy that he heard voices. It was his Jeannie coming to him, and with the thought his eyes lighted and his pulses began to beat out a mad tattoo. Jeannie! Jeannie, he whispered. My Jeannie at last. My lovely Jeannie. My wife, in sickness and in health, death us do part, Jeannie. He did not move forward, but stood where he was, his limbs weak. The rough door was thrown open, and the rays of a lantern lighted up the gloomy building. Once again, the sound of hoarse voices came like a fearful echo to the ears of the fugitive. Then his senses cleared, for he saw his wife in the doorway. He tried to call out to her, but couldn't. But he stretched forth his arms. His fingers tingled to touch hers. He saw her pale face with the wind-blown hair straggling across her brow. And then he saw her eyes, and his left hand came thumping back to his breast and stayed there pressed tight above his heart. For 3 or 4 moments, the woman stood looking at him. Then she swung the lantern round to where, behind her, a little group of men stood, one of them in uniform. Her free hand pointed shakily towards her husband. Now this is women, lads, so listen up, yeah? And the words that came from her came in what was almost a scream. There! She said. There he is! Take him! That's women, lads, yeah? And that was over 120 years ago. So listen up, man. Wake up. Smell the coffee. They're no good for you. They're just liars. They've got no problem putting you in prison. Okay? There's no loyalty when it comes to women. They're all married to the state. You trust police officers more than you. Okay?